Growing up in Pasadena was great. Um, it's a city known for beauty and for recreation, but we, during the summers especially, would get pummeled by air pollution. Um, in the 1970s, none of us kids realized our parents had been dealing with this for a generation, but we felt it in our lungs. If you were outside for a couple hours playing sandlot baseball, whether you had asthma or not, your lungs got constricted. Your eyes would tear up. You would get bad headaches. I remember this so clearly. You know, we'd be playing baseball or skateboarding, which is a really popular thing. And we come in, and it wouldn't be because we fell. We'd come in because we felt so ghastly. And my mom, the scientist, would just say, "Oh, it's smog. Go lie down. Here's an aspirin and put a damp washcloth over your forehead." You know, which really didn't do anything for you at all. But this was something that was just part of it was like the backdrop of our childhood. July 26, 1943 was LA's Pearl Harbor. It was on that day, a broiling day in the middle of summer, in the middle of World War II. Los Angeles itself is doing well despite occasional fears that there's going to be some warfare here. A thick smog came in. I don't know from what direction, but it got so viscous and acrid that police officers directing traffic disappeared. Window washers vanished. It was the beginning of having smog-related automobile accidents. It was so bad, mothers were dragging their children into department stores to keep them from coughing. And a sort of hysteria built because we'd had smogs before, there'd been ordinances, there'd been commissions, there'd been outcries, but this one was different. And it was the byproduct of having too many cars and too much combustion in a very high pressure weather system where it just kind of perked over the area and stayed. And it was so bad the politicians couldn't ignore it and say, you know what, just give it time, the winds will blow, we'll tweak a few smokestacks and things will be normal, people. No, this one was a slap across the face that we were in the beginning of a crisis. Dr. Haagen-Smit was the man who probably saved Southern California and whose work still echoes today across the third world, in China, etc., because he found that air pollution was the result of egregious emissions coming out of the top of a smokestack, none of which we had in Pasadena. It wasn't the result of sulfur coming out of some factory. So air pollution was the result of having uncombusted materials coming out of the back of a tailpipe, hydrocarbons basically, that would react in sunlight with nitrogen oxide to produce ozone and other very dangerous chemicals that were bad for human health and bad for plant life and everything. It was an incredibly unpopular message for him to say. It was tailpipe exhaust with the famous California side, which had drawn so many millions out here. That's really poisoning the area. But he started it all by drawing air into his basement lab at Caltech, reducing it to acid, running further experiments, duplicating his effort, publicizing it, and it blew minds. I mean, he was, in his own nonpartisan way, challenging the might of the automobile companies that were the darlings of America, GM, Ford, Chrysler. They were the emblems of American greatness across the world. And he was basically saying, you know what, your cars are killing machines. The problem was, you know, just because you know the answer doesn't mean you can pack the genie back in the bottle. And it was impossible. Because even as we were learning, cars were poison machines. We were building new freeways further and further out from the city center. Automobile showrooms were springing up. Gas stations were just sprouting like weeds, and now, you know, they're not only selling gas, but they're giving away free stuff. You know, so a freeway culture was building around Los Angeles, which had been auto-centric, building very wide boulevards, lowering traffic speeds, promoting department store signs, all for the car-driven lifestyle. So, you know, they were asking us to repudiate the fundamentals that made Southern California life different. So it took a darn long time to get people to go, you know what, maybe my choices aren't so great. But they loved the mobility, they loved the cool vinyl seats and the wingback, you know, and the stylish wing cars and the hood ornaments. You know, I mean, we were living in a very car-driven world when the car was making people sick. The beginning of our vanquishing of air pollution really started, I would say, 6 or 7 years after Haagen-Smith's landmark stories and other groups, even the car companies, begrudgingly admitting their tailpipe exhaust was the source of the problem. The 1960s saw the beginning of the California legislature requiring cars to have retrofitting equipment, mufflers, filters, those types of things. The legislature got more and more involved. People were demanding, especially mothers, solutions. And the big breakthrough came when California won the right to impose stricter tailpipe standards on vehicles in state than the rest of the country. Detroit, Michigan, led by John Dingell, did not like this idea. Other states didn't like this idea, but we banded together with Massachusetts, New York. Robert Kennedy was instrumental in giving advice, and we went with something called the emissions waiver, which gave us this right. The Lyndon Johnson administration also brought an antitrust case against the car makers for conspiring, deceiving, and tricking Californians that believed they were working on the problem when really they were just filibustering, delaying, and tricking. That kind of ended with a whimper. Nixon settled the case. Although it was under Nixon that we had the first Clean Air Act. And so that waiver became part of the Clean Air Act. But still through the 70s, as my lungs can attest growing up, we had a solution, but it didn't mean the remedy was at hand, because it just takes a while for technology and public acceptance to creep through the political ecosystem. The Los Angeles area still has the worst air pollution in the United States. It's greatly improved, partly because of the Clean Air Act, and there is an environmental ethic in the United States. It's still really bad air. It's not like China, which loses 3,000 people a day, but we still lose thousands of people a year prematurely to air quality. Californians as a whole want to be green. They don't want air pollution. They want clean water. They want clean soil. But we have a very passive type of environmentalism. What I mean by that is we allow ourselves to be taxed. We allow ourselves to pay for clean air initiatives, public transit, better roads, alternative energy, every time you fill up your car at the gas station. Every time you make a purchase or pay your property tax, you're getting hit there. That is what's really propelling environmental progress or keeping things the status quo. There's not people pouring vegetable oil under the Prius. Although we have a lot of electric cars and hybrids here, it's still only 2 or 3% of the total driving population. People still mainly drive solo in their cars. We have the worst traffic in the United States too. So in a way, we have kind of relied on technology and levies to, allow us to feel good about where we are environmentally. There's not people protesting. Yes, we recycle. We've kind of just been programmed or conditioned like a rat, that this is what the things you have to do if you want to exist in California. But there's also an independent streak out here that says the two things you don't mess with in California is with a car or somebody's gun. I hate to say it. I don't know if we're still as gun crazy here, but when you start asking people not to drive or to work at home or to carpool people feel having like their rights invaded. One of the more interesting stories of the LA smog crisis is when they tried to get rid of the backyard incinerator where people would burn their dry trash. And you would think they were asking for people's firstborns. There was a great tumult and resistance to doing it. So we have, in a way, very unreconcilable spirit of wanting clean air, but also wanting our consumer rights. Moving forward, there are a lot of lessons we can learn from LA's experience in the smog chamber. The first one is apply science, use reason, impose logic, and resist your first instinct to blame and judge and execute the first smokestack you don't like, or the first easy solution that somebody whispers into your head. There's a reason America is the technological vanguard of the world, and it's through calm, application of science. The other lesson is be careful of the culture you build communities on. And if it seems too good to be true, it's false. The idea that you could be having millions of cars running on internal combustion technology, zip around without having a consequence was delusional and really dishonest and incredibly dangerous. And that's where we found ourselves in the middle of the 50s. We were building freeways. We were green lighting, bigger garages. We were promoting car giveaways. And even as science was saying, this is deleterious to the public health. We have to be very aware of the lifestyles we're encouraging people to accept if we don't know the consequences, And so Los Angeles is built on the idea of suburban, freewheeling lifestyle, spread out. Now we're going the opposite direction, including in Pasadena. Pasadena embraced the car like nobody's business. Now Pasadena has built so many stucco apartment buildings, you can't see the mountains anymore. Maybe that's just the march of progress and understanding, or it just shows that we were short-sighted before when we were just loving anything you put a key into. We also have to realize, environmentalism, is about relying on technology. It is about, understanding when every time you make a purchase, you're paying for the right to live in an area that's prone to terrible air pollution. I'd say the last lessons are, listen to your mother. When a mother gets upset and sees a child that should be excelling in school, but is distracted, is coughing, is lethargic, there's something going on. There's something wrong. There shouldn't be air pollution in the year 2018. One of the big lessons I would tell you, or one of the scary realities, is that we aren't making the progress I think Dr. Hogensmith would have expected, or the world would have expected, or our grandparents would have wanted, that we're still dealing with this, not only here, but in other countries, in India and the Middle East. It is a, it's a reminder the world has a long darn way to go.